Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of This Is Your Captain Speaking. Today I've got a really cool guest on. I'm really excited to have a chat because it's a fellow marketer as well, and I'm super excited. And I just before we get into the conversation and I give a proper introduction on who this person is, I'm going to go through our CV a little bit here, just in terms of our guest today has been in the marketing space for over 20 years. And having worked at numerous positions in a couple of different organizations. I see in your CV here is a product marketing, quite a bit of product marketing earlier on, working with companies like Nordstrom, AT&T, Level 3 Communications, Janus Capital, and then going and doing your own thing 9 years ago, setting up Shake Marketing. So today I'm really, really excited to have on Stacey Danheiser. Nice to meet you, Stacey, and great to have you on.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Perfect. Tell me a little bit about what you guys do over at Shake.
Yes. So, as you mentioned, I worked in corporate marketing for about 14 years. I worked for 5 different Fortune 500 companies, and then I decided to go start a consulting business, mostly to help organizations bring more sophistication to their marketing and build better impact. Because my kind of passion is all to be customer focused, and all of those roles that I ended up holding in corporate were very much aligned with customer needs and customer direction. And I started to notice a trend where marketing is moving now into this sort of tactical realm. And I have a lot of conversations with marketers and companies these days where the marketers feel like order takers, and the CEOs are also feeling like they have to tell the marketing team what to do. And so we've kind of like swung the pendulum away from customers and into, tech and tactics. And so I'm very passionate about helping to drive that back to the customer lens, to ultimately drive more impact for marketing programs in the business, but also for marketers to have more satisfaction and joy from their career, because nobody likes to feel like they're stressed out and overwhelmed with a long list of things to do every single day. So
that's awesome. I love that, by the way, because the tactical marketing thing is interesting, right? Because when I look back, I studied marketing. So I studied marketing before time began. So like 20 something years ago, I studied marketing. And during that time, and I found this as well with younger siblings and that I also studied similar, that to teach people how to do the tactical things, like when you go into the marketing world, it's a completely different thing from what you're learning in uni, right? And even the tech space. So I've been working in the tech space for 10 years. When I first came into the tech space, it was like a completely new thing. It was a completely different job than any other marketing job I'd done before, right? And that tactical marketing thing you mentioned before, like let's call it like new business acquisition, lead generation, alignment with the sales org, understanding how the sales org operate in order to support them best, and making sure that stuff is moving down to the funnel. Like none of that was on the curriculum when I was studying. So like there's this massive gap. I don't know if you're seeing the same thing or what your thoughts are on that.
Well, exactly. I think what I see is that I think there's a lack of understanding of fundamentals, actually. And because of that, a lot of people are finding themselves in these situations that they don't know how to navigate or build a plan around. And so it's not about the tactic or the new tool. Now it's all Chat GPT, for example. It's not about that. It's about if you have sort of this fundamental framework and you understand the fundamentals, any new tech or any new product or any new audience that's thrown at you, you can figure it out. And so I think it's about mastering some of those fundamentals. And I think, yes, I agree. In university, it feels so theoretical. And the reality is, when you start your marketing job, you're not given the top role, right? And you're not responsible for managing a massive strategy or creating a big giant budget. So it's about really understanding the business. What is the business trying to achieve? And then how does that align with what customers want and need? And really, frankly, I just think that's like the role of marketing, is to be the bridge between, what customers want and what the company sells. And if marketing can learn how to be that bridge, then it makes the job so much easier.
100%. You mentioned before there about like the CEOs maybe or C-levels telling the marketing team what to do. This is a big issue. I come across this all the time, right? And marketers, as you mentioned quite rightly, don't know what the right things to do are because nobody has taught them how to do it. And perhaps the CEO was maybe at a conference somewhere and seeing somebody on stage talk about a specific strategy that worked particularly well for them. They come back in after their week at the conference, sit down with the marketing team. Okay, marketing team, you just drop everything and build this funnel based on that. Dangerous territory, right?
Yes. Well, and yeah, exactly. I think it kind of goes down to, two or three things. The first is that the marketing team doesn't really understand the business. So the question, as a marketer, you can ask yourself is, do I know how the company makes money? Do I know how that's being measured? And so you can start to see, which products are the most important, which customer segments are the most important, which geographies are the most important. So having just an understanding of the business and then working with finance to understand, okay, what are the most important levers that are being measured right now? Is it all about, like, for example, I worked at a company where we would look at sales. That was a big lever, but because the install time was, 12 months out, sales was one metric, revenue was a different metric. That was when money was actually being collected. That was 12 months later. And then expenses, of course, we were in this stage that I worked at, one of these Fortune 500 companies. It was a very big sort of process, multiple employees, a lot of geographies. We're going through a lot of company acquisitions, so expenses were always sort of at the top. So when I knew that sales, revenue, expenses, that's what the CFO cares about, that's what they're reporting to shareholders. So then I had to start learning that part of the business when I'm presenting marketing tactics and programs instead of talking about leads and, opportunities, et cetera. Like, they wanted to just know those kind of three things. What is it doing for these, for sales, revenue, and cutting expenses? So I think number one is knowing the business. I think the second thing is knowing customers. And so, especially in B2B, this is, a lot of marketers don't have access directly to customers. They're learning about their customers through the sales organization or through, recorded calls with customer service. And so they're not having those direct one-on-one conversations with customers to inform and actually be the seat at the table that is coming with the voice of customer and all of those insights that the C-suite wants. I have seen this shift because I do customer research for companies, when marketing comes to the table and now is actually driving the results and driving the insights. All of a sudden, everybody kind of sits up and leans in because they want to know what customers are saying. And marketing is coming with a more neutral, long-term view than just sort of that sales piece, which is how are we going to close business this month? And so this is, informing maybe product roadmaps or operational strategies, et cetera. So that's a big bucket is knowing customers and making sure you're budgeting for research and spending time talking to customers. And then I think the third one is just, what I see in companies is not really a clear idea of the role of marketing. So as I mentioned before, I think the role has evolved so much that we have seen a lot of responsibilities kind of stripped away from the marketing function. I think new positions, for example, were spun up, like chief customer experience officer. Chief revenue officer was meant to kind of combine marketing and sales. I think you'll have a chief strategy officer. So all of these little functions have been, especially in larger organizations, kind of been gradually stripped away from marketing because they weren't doing it. And in the smaller organization, however, the expectation still is that marketing is overseeing all of this and really understands that. So I think a good place to start is, depending on the size of the company, really asking what the vision and being able to set the vision for marketing, and what the expectation of the role is, because we know that, CMO is the shortest tenured position in the C-suite. Mm-hmm. And the big reason for that is just kind of misalignment around what the C-suite expects versus what marketing is able to deliver. And so I like to get alignment on that simple question, because perception is reality. So you're kind of up against this thing whether you like it or not. And the majority of us work for non-marketers, people that did not study marketing in school or never had a marketing job. And so we need to understand kind of what their perception of marketing is, what they view the role of marketing as, so that we can either start to change perceptions or, build on that and set a vision with them.
But didn't you know that marketing's super easy and everyone can do it? Is that?
Yeah, I mean, everyone has an opinion, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's one of those. So a lot of the things the end result of what marketing delivers is always very tangible, and it's very objective or subjective. Like you can have an opinion, as you mentioned, on things, and it's very simple. Then at the end of a process to say, no, should have been different. But if you're not involved in the process, then you don't know how that whole thing plays out. So that's why I think you're setting the expectations really. A good example of this is in positioning and messaging, right? So I'm guessing you've done many positioning and messaging workshops and sessions, and that journey is a long and painful journey for everyone involved, right? And a lot of CEOs or a lot of people, let's say, would come and say, okay, we need to change our positioning and messaging, right? That's the first step. Okay, let's get into it and let's discuss it. Let's do some workshops. Let's answer some core questions, come up with a positioning statement, etc. That takes time, effort, pain, discussion. Like there's so many elements to it, and it's a long and treacherous journey to get there, and a lot of alignment is needed. But nobody understands. They think, oh no, we'll just sit in a room for 30 minutes and we'll come up with some phrases and then that's it. And it's like, no.
Yes. Why is this taking so long? Yes. Interestingly, so I do value proposition workshops. And I have found, I mean, one of, this, and I felt this way when I worked in corporate as well. Find strategic partners or consultants that you could bring in to be your advocate to help you gain alignment, because internal alignment is actually the number one, I think, barrier to achieving any sort of success in a marketing role. And, what I advise marketers is be in control of who you're bringing in and getting those parties to help be your advocate. So instead of waiting for your CEO to hire somebody who's a friend, their neighbor who happens to do marketing consulting, who's going to come in and lead a workshop. And so it's really actually beneficial to get a neutral person to help spearhead that process, just because of all of the political savviness required to navigate, bringing the product team together and the sales team and the CEO and the marketing team, et cetera. The other thing I would say that when we do these value proposition workshops, I always love to get I do internal interviews. So I talk to the sales team about, what do you think is the value proposition? Why do customers buy from us? Ask all of those questions to understand how the sales team is currently pitching it. And I do that with the product team, the sales team, and the executives. And then I always ask to go do customer interviews. And so I ask these same questions to customers, and I match the two things up. And 99% of the time, especially in large organizations, there is a gap between what the internal people believe and what customers are saying. And so, that becomes like indisputable. So it's easier to kind of break down and start getting alignment, because now it's not an opinion of, the product manager versus the sales manager. It's now, this is what customers have directly said, and here's the themes that have come out of customer interviews. And then everybody can start to align around that. So that piece is a little tip for you.
I think that's great. No, I really agree. And I'll hold in on the fact that you mentioned just about getting a neutral third party to come in and run these type of things. I couldn't agree with you more. I've gone through this now in the past year with 4 different companies, like this messaging and positioning changes, and I've always brought in external agencies typically that run the process end to end. Because there's a lot of boxes that need to be ticked, and there's a lot of discussion, conversation, etc., that needs to be recorded, and there's a lot of like piecing together and chopping through the fat of that conversation to try to turn it into something that can actually be used to the outside world, as well as then testing that with external customer base. And it's really like you take out the bias by having somebody else there that first of all knows the process, but also doesn't really know your business very well. Like it's good for them to not know your business very well, or even the industry very well, I found, because they're the ones that will then try to come up with a message that they understand. Right. That's and that's key, because most people are going to be talking we offer the blah 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 omni-channel blah 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 buzzwords AI blah blah blah, and I was like, hold on, no, I don't know what that means, right? So by bringing somebody else in that has really no real connection, they're able to come up with something that's digestible to the outside world. And there's one company.
And I
go ahead.
And I think too, something different, because that's the thing, especially, so we did some research actually for one of our books, Standout Marketing, and we evaluated and we did a scrape of the websites and the Twitter feeds of the top 40 global companies in 3 different industries: telecom, data centers, and then UK universities, just to see, how this thing plays out. And what we found is that everybody had the exact same story. The same themes showed up over and over, the same YS messaging, the same jargon. And so what ends up happening within an industry is everybody kind of copies, copy and paste, and how can I make this sound just a little bit better? But, that doesn't necessarily help differentiate you. You could sound a little bit better, but really what stands out is being different. And so I think having somebody that's maybe unfamiliar with the industry can also offer a perspective that's not like, how is every other manufacturing company communicating this? No, here's how they're doing it in financial services. And here's some things you might want to consider that, might be completely different as a way of thinking and kind of sparking some ideas.
For sure. It's also an interesting conversation around a lot of companies go, oh no, we're completely different to everyone else. Whereas in reality, when you have those sessions, people are like saying the same stuff as the competitors are saying. Like the stuff that's coming out of your mouth to describe the organization is exactly what a competitor is saying about you. So, but at the same time, you're saying we want to be standing out within the category and being completely different. I was like, something is not weighing up here. And my personal opinion is it's not necessarily just the stuff that's in words. Okay, that's important, how you word something, what the copy is on your website, blah blah blah, right? I think it's your actions, like how you push yourself out into the world, how you deal with customers, what your customers are saying about you, right? How you're then pushing what your customers are saying about you out into the world as well, right? How you act outside, like ESG stuff. What are you doing there? Like all of these things are how you act as an organization. They're all the points that actually build the brand more so than what's the copy on the homepage. But it's very hard for people to understand that.
Yeah, no, I love that. I have a messaging framework that I like to use that says, what's the number one customer concern? And then what is our solution or answer to that? And then what are the proof points? And so if you're saying that we help you grow revenue, for example, and the way that we help you grow revenue is that we have these specific features, with our product, and then here are the specific proof points where we've been able to do that, either measuring that value or customer testimonials or customer case studies. Kind of most people don't take it through that whole process. The proof points are so hard to gather that they kind of just, we'll get to that later. And the problem is what happens over time is that now everybody is just claiming to grow revenue within the industry. And, and customers start rolling their eyes because now they've seen this so much, because everybody's saying that it's not believable. So it's kind of going through that whole process and making sure that you can back it up with actions, to your point, that it's not just marketing fluff.
100%, couldn't agree with you more. Bullshit free, just like do it, like show people the value. Don't like show it and prove it to them, right? That's the important thing.
Yeah.
I got a couple of questions. You had three different stages in what you'd mentioned there before. It's just about like knowing the basics, knowing your customers, like in practice, right? Let's talk about, or knowing the business, like knowing the business, like you mentioned before, what was important to your CFO, right? So expenses, what was being driven back via those expenses, I guess. So your customer acquisition costs and your lifetime value, those two things, I guess your CFO was probably interested in looking at, right? A lot of marketers don't even know where to start when it comes to actually understanding that stuff. Are you getting practical tip? Are you getting close to the CFO and the finance team as a marketer? How are you getting a grasp on that?
Yeah. Yes. Okay. So my recommendation is find somebody, not necessarily going directly to the CFO, find somebody who works for the CFO who can help you read some of these financial statements and understand how the business is being measured. So that's, step one. I remember I used to have meetings with our finance person, and they would want to talk through excruciating detail in the budget. And my eyes are glazing over, and I'm like, I don't care. I'm so busy. I have stuff to do. But I had to keep meeting with them really to understand this. And then, one day it just clicked. And I was like, oh, I get it. I get it. And I started, I was listening to shareholder calls, and it just sort of like all made sense to me at some point. But I would say the best way is really to either, go online and find a class that's about how to read financial statements, or better, make a friends with somebody in the finance team and have them walk through this with you. Because what you're really trying to understand is, what are the most important metrics for our business? And they're all different. I mean, that's the thing. There's 50 different metrics, but there's a priority order, and depending on the stage of company, I have found there are certain things that are more important than others, depending on what's going on. So you've got to really get this sort of inside view on that piece. So that's sort of number one recommendation. The other is to pull some data. So I actually have a marketing training program where I work with marketing leaders who want to level up. They want to elevate their skills, and they want to get a seat at the leadership table. And one of it is always about data. How do we collect data? How do we read data? How do we make decisions based on data? And so spending a fair amount of time on collecting information about your customers, getting customer segmentation information. So how much are they spending with you? How many products are they buying? How long was the sales cycle? How long do they typically stay with you? What are they spending month over month? Sort of all of those things to start to make an informed view of where to spend your time, and which customer segments are the most profitable. Sometimes internally, I've found everybody is marching toward one customer segment, but then when you actually pull the data, I just did this with a company. It's a pretty big company, and it was pretty surprising, because where they were spending 90% of their time, they were winning like 5% of those deals, versus there's another segment that we uncovered that they were winning 50% of the deals. And so, when this sort of got illuminated, the COO and everybody's like, wait a minute, we've been focusing on the wrong thing. Why aren't we closing more? We need to go try to find more customers like this. But the reality is nobody was looking at it. And so, that's where marketing can start to really play a more strategic role, and, elevate the perception of the value they're bringing.
That's excellent advice. That's really, really great advice. Thank you for that. I just have one last question before we finish up, because it's also on this as well. It's a practical one for marketers as well. The second part was around knowing your customers and speaking with customers. Again, I have my way of dealing with it. I'm an outgoing guy. I've got no problem like just doing it, right? Reaching out to customers and just going with it. But the larger the organization, the more standardized a process you need to have in place, etc. Like, what would you recommend to marketers that want to start on that journey of getting closer to the customer? How?
Yeah. So a couple things. If you're in B2B, for B2B marketing, it's to start building a relationship with your sales team. Pick one or two salespeople and start to learn the sales process, because sales is often the gatekeeper to the customer, and they will not open the door to invite you on customer meetings unless they believe that you are not going to mess up their deal and say something inappropriate. And so in order to do that, they need to trust you. And the best way to do that is to start to understand their vernacular, understand their process. I mean, I can tell you, I personally have attended sales training, I don't know, 3 or 4 times, and I was always the only marketer in there. And, there was confusion, like, why is marketing sitting in sales training? And I'm like, you guys, we want the same thing. We're both trying to get customers. I'm just looking at it long-term. You're looking at it short-term. We can work together on this. And when I started being able to speak the same language as a sales team, I got invited on customer calls. And anytime I wanted to go, have a meeting with a customer or run something by, they would say, yeah, sure, I'll set the meeting up for you right now. Because they knew that I understood, their game, and I wasn't going to mess up the deal. So that's number one. And that's an easy one for marketers to do, that most, by the way, they just don't take the time to learn sales. And the second one is for companies that are any company doing events. So typically, if you were hosting events, if you're going to trade shows, if you're sponsoring events, that's a great opportunity for marketing to get a seat, at the event. And now you're actually in the same room with customers and with salespeople. And so you can start to interact and ask questions directly to customers. I would say the majority of marketers don't necessarily take advantage of that opportunity, because it has to do with coming prepared. So if you know you're going to be going to an event, you have to think ahead of time, who are the people you might want to talk to? What are the pressing questions that you're trying to get insight on? So it might be about a content idea, or value prop idea, or positioning, or other information that you're trying to get. But you have to come prepared. Otherwise, what ends up happening when you're in these events is you'll default to, what did you think about the last speaker? Or what do you think about the food at this event? Something that's completely irrelevant to help you with your marketing plan and business. So, I mean, those are two like easy ways right now. And then the third, of course, is asking to listen to recorded calls, to customer success calls, just to start formulating some really insightful questions. And when you can go back to the business and say, I listened to 50 calls and it brought up 5 questions that I think that we need to dig deeper in and to get some more information on. Put your journalism hat on. And, when you go back to the business and say, I'm not clear. I don't think we have clarity on these 5 things. And then that might be your entry to say, I'd like to do some one-on-one interviews, or bring somebody in to do one-on-one interviews, because it is a skill set like anything else.
I love how your brain is so structured like a product marketer, by the way. Like the way that you approach the customer side of things, and it's a mix of data, understanding exactly what customers are saying about you, listening back to calls to get like mass amounts of data to find like little pinpoint things of problems that maybe people are seeing within the product and so on. Like that's great. Like that's what I look for in every product marketer, every single product marketer. It's fantastic. It's really good advice as well. The events thing is super interesting as well. Like for me personally, I would always go and when I'm at an event, try to create relationships with customers, because then you can lean on them for other things. So, hey, you've seen some success. Let's do a success story together. Would you be interested in coming on for an interview? Let's record that interview. Let's use that for further marketing purposes. Hey, would you be interested in coming on stage and speaking about our product at an event? Let's do that together. But that's the first step in that journey towards creating that relationship where you can ask for those things from customers, right?
100%. Yeah. And I think LinkedIn too is a great way, especially if you're either new to a marketing role, or if you've been there for a while, connect with your sales team, see who your sales team is connected with at your customers, and start reaching out and building your own relationship via that channel as well.
100%. Well, look, Stacey, I could literally talk to you all day long here, but we need to jump, unfortunately. But where can people find you, and how can people connect with you?
Yes. Okay. So I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, so please reach out on LinkedIn. I also have a website, shakemktg, as in marketing.com. And I have created a free scorecard. I don't know if maybe you could share a link to it.
Sure.
Called the Marketing Impact Index, which is basically a series of questions, and you can go through and get a free assessment on where you might have gaps or opportunities within your marketing approach today.
Fantastic. Okay, super. We'll share all the links. We'll put a link to your LinkedIn, also to your website, as well as to that index scorecard. Stacey, thanks so much for coming on and speaking with me today. It's been super, super interesting, and I hope to have you on again at some point in the future. Yeah.
All right. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks. Hey guys, this has been another episode of This Is Your Captain Speaking. Tune in next week for more great content. Thanks, Stacey.
Bye.